My parents were standing in the center of the room and shouting at each other. Dad shouted at Mom so loudly that I thought I was going to go deaf. And Mom was so angry that she was ready to grab a chair and throw it at him. I didn't know what to do or how to react, so I just ran to my room. Even after I closed the door, the screams continued to come, and I could clearly hear their words. I fell on the bed, groping for my headphones and putting them on my head. I turned on the music so loudly that I could not hear them. Then, burying myself in my pillow, I began to cry. I got up early in the morning, I got dressed, and quickly ran away from home without even having a snack. I knew that in the morning, after my parents had been arrested, after yesterday's fight, they would start to fight again, and I didn't want to hear it anymore. I was walking to school and thinking about my classmates, how they'd come home and sit down at the table with their parents and discuss how their day was. I was very jealous of them. My parents had been fighting for a long time, for several years. These were small and rare fights that happen to everyone. For several years, these were small and rare fights that happen to everyone. But over time, they began to occur more and more often, and the fights themselves became more serious. If you're interested, the whole reason for their fighting is our poverty. Dad works 2 jobs, but both pay negligibly little, and Mom works at home and looks after our neighbor for money. They work so hard that it's amazing that they find time to sort things out at all. On the way to school, I went to the supermarket to buy a chocolate bar. There was a big TV at the checkout, and an advertisement for a super lottery was running on it, where the main prize was a trip to a ski resort and $100 million. Can you imagine what you could buy with that amount of money? I also can't. I handed the cashier a chocolate bar and $100. The cashier smiled and asked if I wanted to test my luck and buy a lottery ticket. For some reason, he added that I could win a trip to the resort for the whole family. These words made me think about my parents. In fact, they were very good and have always tried, and are now trying to ensure that our family lives in prosperity. They were just tired. They hadn't spent time together for so long, and they needed a rest. It was hard for me to do it. I have been saving this $100 for a long time and wanted to buy something new instead of these rags that I have to wear. But now I believe that even such a meager chance to make my family happy was worth the money. When I left the store, I thought, what the hell did I just do? The lottery for $100? Only a perfect idiot like me could do that. All day at school, I berated myself for this spontaneous purchase. And the worst thing is that when I came home, my mother asked me for the $100 to pay the electricity bill, which it turns out we owed a long time ago. I didn't lie to her, and I told her the whole truth. My mom wanted to yell at me, but she didn't have time because the lights suddenly went out all over the house, and we found ourselves in pitch darkness. Yes, they turned off our electricity for non-payment. We dined by candlelight. Even though it was very dark in the living room, I could see how upset my parents were. I know that now they were berating themselves for the fact that there was not even a light in the house. In the morning, I skipped out of the house again. I decided to go to the supermarket and try to return the ticket. The cashier replied that it wouldn't work since the lottery was held last night. He just advised me to check the winning numbers. On TV, they played a replay of yesterday's program where they showed that no one took the main prize and $10 million out of the 100, and they were still waiting for the winner. Without any enthusiasm, I took out the ticket and started checking the numbers. 4, the first number, coincided with 8, and the second one, 15. I'm lucky, 16. Wait, 23? Well, I took out the ticket and started checking the numbers. 4, the first number, coincided with 8, and the second one, 15. I'm lucky. 16. Wait, 23? Well, 42? God, I won! I won! I started screaming like crazy and dancing right in the middle of the store. The cashier could not believe it and just looked at me like I was crazy, just like the other people in the store did. I ran home as fast as I could. When I saw that my parents were going to work, I jumped into my dad's arms as if I was 4 years old, and said that he no longer needed to go there because we are rich now. My parents thought I was crazy, but I was foaming at the mouth to prove to them that I had won. Dad called work and said that he would be an hour late. The three of us got into the car and drove to the TV station. There were other people in the building who were photographed by journalists. Apparently, they were the other winners. When I turned out to one of the organizers of the contest, for some reason the music stopped. The lights in the room dimmed and the floodlights began to play with different colors. A host appeared on a small stage. He announced loudly into the microphone that they had finally gotten the main winners. A spotlight beam fell on us. The host invited us to the stage with his hand. Mom and Dad were shocked. A small cart covered with some kind of cloth was rolled out onto the stage with one movement of his hand. The host pulled off the blanket. Then we finally saw our prize. $10 million. Only now my parents realized what had happened. They didn't believe me until the last moment, until they saw the winnings. Everyone there started applauding us, and the journalists pushed each other and tried to interview us. The host said that after the award ceremony, we could go home and pack our things, because tomorrow morning we will fly to a ski resort in Alaska. When we were already at home, Mom and Dad still couldn't recover from the shock. They looked at me, praised me for my initiative, and it seems for the first time in a long time, they didn't fight. They looked so happy. I was happy that, in the morning, a car was sent for us. Dad took a huge suitcase with him. Yes, our wedding was there. My father was afraid to leave it at home. As many already knew about our luck, a small private jet was waiting for us at the airport. It was just us and the pilot on board. Everything was so cool. I was looking forward to every second of the trip and was happy looking at my parents holding hands. Mom and Dad were drinking champagne. We'd already flown by the most snow-covered part of Alaska. The pilot reported that the temperature in the area now reaches -40. I looked out of the porthole and enjoyed the views. Suddenly, I noticed how something big and black flew into the engine of the plane. The engine caught fire, and the plane began to shake. The light began to flicker, and the plane began to fall. I woke up because my dad was shaking me. I opened my eyes, and he hugged me tightly. He was glad that everything was fine with his beloved Aurora. It was very cold on the plane. I looked around and saw that the aircraft covering was broken. Mom and the pilot were standing aside, arguing about something. The pilot gathered us all. He said that due to poor visibility, he had to fly lower, but apparently something very large flew into the engine. He couldn't handle the controls, but due to the low altitude and soft snow, the landing was almost successful. My parents were not happy, and the pilot himself looked guilty. I thought we should radio someone and ask for help. The pilot and I went into the control cabin. The whole dashboard sparked, and the radio hissed strangely. He was connecting the wires, and he told me to report what had happened. I tried to say something, but the radio just hissed back at me. We checked our food and water supplies, and Dad, at the same time, checked the suitcase with our prize. Everything was in its place. It's good that Mom had packed up some warm clothes now. It would be very useful to us. It was hard to think because of the cold. Dad and the pilot began to think about our plan of action. First of all, we tried to close that huge hole from where the cold was blowing. It worked. It didn't get any warmer on the plane, but at least the snow and wind stopped blowing inside. Dad and Mom began to collect everything that could burn to make a fire and keep warm. The pilot went into the control cabin, continuing to try to contact at least someone. When he returned, he just threw up his hands. He said that he was trying to convey our approximate coordinates, but he was not sure that anyone had accepted them. He would keep trying every hour. It got dark quickly. The plane was small, and it seemed like we were running out of supplies that could be burned. My fingers and toes were very cold, and I was sleepy. My eyes started to close. The pilot began to push me. My parents were indignant, but he said that no one should sleep because such coldness is deceiving and that you can fall asleep and never wake up again. Then everyone started watching each other so that no one would sleep. The next day, the weather calmed down and snow and wind stopped tormenting us. We decided that we should go out into the forest to find dead wood or branches, since there was nothing left to burn in the plane. The pilot stayed behind to report on the radio about us. The whole family went in search of firewood, but we found very little. We were in the forest for a long time, but as soon as we heard the howling of wolves that reached us, we decided that it was time to return. The pilot saw a small pile of branches that we managed to get. He said it wasn't enough. I tried to light a fire, but the branches were a little damp, and the cold was unbearable, and my hands were trembling treacherously. Dad looked at me inside and went to a suitcase. He took many, many bundles of money from there. Now we were lighting a fire with a couple of $1 million. It was the most expensive fire of my life, but we had nowhere to go, and we tossed pack after pack until the fire finally became strong enough. Everyone was sitting by the fire trying to get warm. I could no longer resist sleep and began to fall asleep like everyone else around, but suddenly we were woken up by some noise outside the window. We quickly got out of the plane to see what it was. Imagine our delight when we saw the lights of a helicopter in the dark sky. We shouted for it to hear us, but the helicopter was going somewhere in the distance. The pilot took out a flare gun and raised up his hand. There was a click, but the life-saving flare did not fire. The pilot fell to his knees and began to sob softly, and the helicopter was going further and further away. It was necessary to do something urgently. I stood hugging Mom and thought that now we were definitely done. However, I saw my father coming towards us with a suitcase. He put it on the snow, opened it, and handed me a lighter. I've never seen Dad so confident. I understood his hint. We needed a fire to attract the helicopter, but apart from our winnings, there was probably another $6 million left. We had nothing to burn. Dad himself couldn't do it, but I could. I set fire to one bill, and the banknotes began to burn one by one until they all burst into a bright flame. The pilot, seeing this, came to his senses. He opened a bottle and poured liquid into the fire, moving further and further away. We couldn't believe it worked. Mom and Dad came up to me and hugged me tightly. We stood like that for probably a few minutes until finally we heard the rising sound of the engine. It was a helicopter. We were saved. A few days after the rescue operation in the hospital, we were sent home. We were incredibly happy to be home. All day, the phone was bursting with calls from journalists. The company even called us with apologies and offered us to go to the ski resort in Alaska again, but we refused, only to the south for now. Despite everything that we experienced and lost millions, my parents and I were happy that I've never seen them more loving and happy in my life than now. And what are you willing to do to make your loved ones happy? Share in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.